Welcome back to another edition of SJHL Insider. Obviously, this one is going to be a little different because you cannot see our faces. And that is because our studio has been taken over for this week here at IKS Media. So the audio version only for SJHL Insider, which is great because our podcast sponsor is SGI. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your Apple Podcasts, whether that be Apple, Spotify, you name it. SGI is our podcast sponsor, but we have lots of other great sponsors for SJHL Insider, that being Chevrolet, Capital Auto Mall, Cantera Seeds, RBC, SaskTel, SGU, Direct West, Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association, Tourism Saskatchewan, and Young's Equipment. Thank you so much for your support, because without your support, we wouldn't be able to put on these shows each and every week, as well as SJHL Weekly. Now, due to our limitations this week, unfortunately, we won't be able to have any guests on the show today, but because it is December 1st, as we are recording this, lots to get into today, because today is also roster cutdown day in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. As well, with it being the first day of a new month, we will announce the players of the month this week. But as we bring in our co-host, Clark Monroe. Clark, how's the week been so far?
It's great. You know, a couple of games each night so far to keep an eye on. Like you said, the end of the month. So we've been having the discussions about players of the month and all those things as well. So it's been a really interesting week and a lot of busy stuff going on. Like you said, the studio's busy here and everybody's buzzing. So it's been a really interesting week.
It has been a really interesting week, and the week, of course, started out on Tuesday in the SJHL with a pair of games, which it's going to be weird because we're about to do the hat trick, but we don't have the graphic. So how about you say a hat trick, you throw it like you always do.
Sure.
And I'll try and make some sound effects for you.
Okay, how about you take care of the horn?
I'll just do the horn. Yeah,
I'm going to do the whooshing afterwards as well.
Yeah.
All right. It's time for the hat trick. Nailed it. I think that was... We might want to just replace the audio
7
on
out
that
of
file.
10.
Yeah.
That was pretty good, though, for not being rehearsed. We didn't talk about it, so that was good.
You know, high quality is all we deal with here. But let's go back to Tuesday night, Jared. Like you said, there's 2 games, some really interesting matchups, and some really interesting results. So let's go into Yorkton versus Weyburn. What do you got from that one?
Well, yeah, Weyburn, in recap, presented by Sask Lotteries. Weyburn earned a 4-1 win over the Yorkton Terriers. It was Weyburn's first game in 10 days because of the sickness that the hockey club had suffered, and of course their games being postponed last week. And then the La Ronge Ice Wolves kicked off 4 games in 5 nights at the Duncan McNeil Arena in Wilcox, earning a 4-3 overtime win over the Notre Dame Hounds. And then last night, Wednesday, the Estevan Bruins got their first action in quite some time as well, but they shut out the La Ronge Ice Wolves 4-0. And then at the cage in Nipawin, a rematch between the Nipawin Hawks and the Melville Millionaires following their game on Sunday. And the Nipawin Hawks earning a 5-3 win over the Millionaires, improving their record to 11-12-1-1. And as a result, have kind of given themselves a little bit of cushion when it comes to the final playoff spot in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. So much so that they're not even in the final playoff spot in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League anymore because they have leapfrogged the Notre Dame Hounds. But Clark, I guess when you look at those 4 games, what stood out for you?
Yeah, so La Ronge, obviously, they're in the middle of a tough stretch, obviously coming down to the southern part of Saskatchewan, 4 games in 5 nights. They're staying in Regina. We actually chatted with head coach and GM Kevin Kaminsky earlier on another show we work for, and you know he was telling us that the boys are ready for the trip and everything, and getting that big win in overtime. Ethan Strick got the winning goal in overtime for them on Tuesday, and it was just a bit of a tough one last night. And you know the words out of Coach Kaminsky's mouth were, "I didn't think it was that bad of a road game for us." But they ended up getting outscored quite a bit, 4-0, obviously, shut out by Cam Herdlicka, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But, you know, overall, La Ronge coming off that, what was a 7-game win streak, if I'm
7-game
correct?
winning streak.
And it ended in Estevan there, and just a really impressive stretch by them. Estevan's not a team that you can just take lightly, and I don't think that they would have or did. But a couple goals by Cade Runke in that game. He continues to roll in Estevan, and that really stood out to me these last couple games, just how Larange kind of handled those 2 different games.
Yeah, and obviously when you start 4 games in 5 nights and you start in Wilcox at the Duncan McNeil Arena, going from the smaller ice surface up in Larange and then going to the big ice surface in Notre Dame, always a challenge, but earning the 4-3 overtime win, of course, is always good. Of course, last time the Larange Ice Wolves went on a southern swing earlier on this season, that was when they handed Humboldt their first regulation loss of the season after Humboldt got off to that 8-0 start, and they ended up going 3-1. And of course, now they've started the trip 1-1, and they will continue it Friday in Weyburn. Then that rematch on Saturday against Estevan, which should be really good. But then also, I guess with that, the last 2 days, I mentioned it earlier, the Weyburn Red Wings returning to action after 10 days off against the Yorkton Terriers. And we talked about it last week when it comes to these teams, especially in the bottom half of the standings. Whenever they're meeting each other, it's going to feel like what we would call a divisional game, where it's a 4-point game, because obviously these teams are fighting for playoff positioning and points because it's so tight at the bottom of the standings. So the fact that, Weyburn can return to action after 10 days off and play as well as they did and earn a 4-1 win over the Yorkton Terriers, a team that's just ahead of them in the standings. That's a big boost for Weyburn.
It is. And, another shout out to Jackson Hassman, who had 2 goals in that game.
The pride of Prince George.
The pride of Prince George. There you go.
I interviewed him when he first committed to the Weyburn Red Wings when I worked in Prince George.
Oh, no way. That's unreal.
There's a fun fact.
And newcomer, now this is the one, I think this is going to be in a future episode of we test out the text-to-speech girl on TikTok with the names.
Yeah, check that out if you haven't seen it yet. Yeah. Very funny.
The video's going well.
Very funny.
We got part 2 coming out in the next couple days probably. Matt Schuforster, I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm going to go with it because it looks grammatically right if you look at it. Grammatically is the wrong word. You know what I mean. Phonetically.
Yeah, phonetically. There you go.
Both hard words. But Matt Schuforster, 38 out of 39, 38 saves out of 39 shots, I should say, for Weyburn in that one. And, another solid effort from the Weyburn Red Wings, and we'll have to see. Like they made a big move, and we'll get to that. I'll wait. Yeah. I'll leave that one.
Hold that off. Yeah,
I will hold that one.
Our topic 3 of the hat trick is going to be very lengthy.
Yeah, we got some
pre-warning.
We got some stuff. Yeah, going on. But for Weyburn to get that win, like you said, specifically against Yorkton, they're only 1 point back of them now after that win in that playoff race, and every point matters. Every point against these teams matters. Like you said, in the bottom 6 there, it's so tight, and I love these matchups going on right now. And even like you said earlier too, you referred to Nipawin's game against Melville. That was a big one for them as well. Big game from Xander Stewart.
Yeah, last 2 games for Nipawin. The fact that they were able to get 4 points against Melville and not a split. Of course, those 2 teams will meet again on Sunday as well, but
what a week.
Yeah, you get 4 points against a team that's right behind you in the standings. And now, again, like I mentioned, because of those 2 wins, they've now leapfrogged the Notre Dame Hounds, and all of a sudden the Nipawin Hawks are in 7th place, and the entire Sherwood division in a playoff spot still as we turn the calendar into December 1st. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I watched a little bit of the Nipawin Hawks and Melville Millionaires game last night. Of course, Nipawin got off to such a hot start. It was 3-0.
Yeah. Shout out to Chase Visser. First goal.
That was and that'll also be, that's one of the transactions we have to report as well.
Right.
But then Melville, you got to give credit where credit is due. Melville fought back. They got the game back to all even at 3, but Nipawin ends up taking the 5-3 win. And now again, like they're 11-12, 1-1 on the season. They're 6-4 in their last 10, and I think the big thing for me when you look at the Nipawin Hawks, I know earlier on in the season we talked about their goals against and their goal differential. It's not as bad as it once was. It's only -13 now. They're starting to turn it around a little bit in that regard, and I think we talked about it with Tad Cozen a couple of weeks ago on SJHL Weekly. The thing is with these young teams in any junior A league or at this level, young teams will always get better as the year goes on. And the Nipawin Hawks have definitely shown that so far this season. And now, as a result, this young team is as of right now, in a playoff spot, 4 points ahead
Yeah.
of the Yorkton Terriers for a playoff spot. And they're 1 point ahead of Notre Dame for 8th. So Nipawin currently sits in 7th, and it continues to blow me away that all 4 teams in the Sherwood are in the playoff spot. But realistically, we shouldn't be surprised.
Right, yeah. And, maybe a little bit of an underrated move that happened, I'm going to say about a month ago now, maybe a little over a month, was Nipawin acquiring Jackson Fellner. Now, if you look at Jackson Fellner's just straight numbers from just the month of November here, I was looking at this as we were talking about players of the month, and we'll get to that in a sec as well. But, his numbers might not be eye-popping necessarily, but he played the 3rd most minutes in the month of November, and I think he got the win there last night, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it's a guy who's kind of come in and maybe, again, like I said, he's not like blowing any teams out of the water in terms of his numbers, but maybe he's just stabilized it a little bit, just enough so that Nipawin can kind of get back into a few games. Because I think that was, like you said, the problem was that the goals against was a big issue. Not that they couldn't score goals, because look at earlier in the season, we were talking about how they were scoring a lot of goals and outscoring maybe some of those problems. But if they could maybe just get a little stabilization back there, and maybe Jackson Fellner has been that guy, playing 462 minutes in the month of November. I just think that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think the Hawks were just looking for some consistency between the pipes, and as a result, they went out and acquired Fellner on, you're close, October 24th from the Milford Mustangs.
Just a little over a month.
4th round pick in the 2023 SJHL draft. But yeah, another solid performance for him last night, and the Hawks continue to play some good hockey, and only 1 game below 500 now. And their next game against Melville Millionaires once again. So they have a chance to potentially get back to 500 for sure.
All right.
But yeah, that was the last 2 days in the SJHL. But with today being December 1st, it's time to announce the November Players of the Month.
Yeah, let's get to it. It was a really interesting month this week. This week. What am I trying to say?
This week's felt like a month.
It's felt like a month.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Very interesting month of November. I'll say that. Very, very much a lot of debate this month in terms of the players. There's back and forth. There was several candidates for each of these awards, and we landed on 4. And here we go. We'll start off with the SGEU MVP of the month.
Well, we always have to land on 4.
Yes. It started higher, though. It was a much higher number, and we whittled it down.
But I think that before we announce these, what I'll say with this month, I think when it comes to deciding the players of the month, what made it a bit more difficult, I think, this month, at least this is just my perspective, as being one of the people that kind of comes together in deciding the players of the month. I think some of the cancellations and teams not playing as many games this month definitely played a factor into, how players got points and stuff like that. Because I was looking at the month stats and whatnot, and you saw some players who had only played 6 games, and then there were some players who had played 9, and
some of the goalies only played 4 or 5.
Exactly. So then you're trying to, weigh out points average, et cetera, and of course it's more than just points. But I think that's what made it a bit more difficult this month. That's just my opinion.
It was.
But it made it tricky.
There was you
had to look at a different perspective.
Oh, for sure. There was a ton of pros. There was, finding little small facts about certain players and maybe weighting those differently, like you said. But if we want to get into it, the SGEU MVP, it's a lot of letters, of the month, from the Flin Flon Bombers, Jeremy Tremblay. And Jeremy, do you want to get into that one?
Well, first off, he's got the best first name in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey
League. A little different than yours. But
actually,
barely, but a little bit, enough.
Not enough, no. But he was outstanding this month. He had 5 goals and 10 assists in 9 games for the Flin Flon Bombers. And I mean, as I said, the article will be up at sjhl.ca. But as I said in the article, I mean, Flin Flon's been and will be one of the top teams in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League this season. That's no surprise. And Tremblay, I mean, in November was outstanding. You get 5 goals and 10 assists in 9 games. Like, that's outstanding. He had 2 4-point nights. One of them being just the other week against the Melford Mustangs, that overtime win at home. So, I mean, the Bombers are rolling. They're playing some really good hockey, and Tremblay's been a big reason why. And,
we talked to head coach and general manager Mike Reagan this week on SJHL Weekly, and, he was raving about Jeremy Tremblay's play. And I think it was Jamie Neugebauer in our discussion conversation said that he's flat out been the best player this month. So yeah, that was kind of the deciding factor, was just how consistent he was, how many big performances he had for their team. And I think, sometimes there was some discussions about some guys who maybe had a few more goals, but from what we've heard, Jeremy Tremblay made a lot of players around him better this month as well, and well deserving of this award.
Yeah, he was very well deserving of this award. You know what? Usually, like in the articles, we don't have honorable mentions or anything like that. I would give this month. I think we should give some honorable mentions for sure. I think Zach Summers of the Melfort Mustangs was outstanding this month.
Yeah,
he was really good, and he's the reigning SGEU MVP of the week. So, correct. I mean, I guess both players get an award.
Yeah.
So it all works out in the end. All right, let's move on to SaskTel Goalie of the Month.
SaskTel Goalie of the Month. And this one, there was a little debate until last night.
Yeah, I was going to say, this one, I think there was discussion about a few different goaltenders.
Yeah.
But after last night's performance, I think it kind of came together that, SaskTel Goalie of the Month has to be Cam Herdlicka of the Estevan Bruins. I mean, you have a 6-1 record. I think he was in 8 games, though. I think he came into relief for 1 game.
Correct, yep.
3 shutouts, a 2.05 goals against average, and a 927 save percentage. I mean, that is rock solid. And, if you get numbers like that from your goaltender, you're going to win a lot of hockey games.
Oh, for sure.
In any league. It doesn't matter. And I know we've talked about it numerous times this season about who's the most valuable, keyword valuable, player to their team. Mm-hmm. And I think, no doubt in my mind, I think Cam Herdlicka he's top 3 in the league.
Well,
easily when it comes to most valuable to their team, because I don't know where the Estevan Bruins would be without Cam Herdlicka this season.
If we can just look at some of his bigger numbers here, full season picture here. 26 games played. Next closest to him, goalie-wise, 21. 1,433 minutes. Next closest to him, same guy, 1271. Harmon Laserhume is second. He's put up a 916 save percentage this season altogether. 272, very solid. And for Estevan, who has played the most games, to rely on him as much as they have so far, like you said, value is a very good word. Cam Herdlicka, what has he won? Has he won 2 goalies of the week? 1 goalie of the week this year? 1 or 2 either way. He's been in the discussion a lot. And, it's this month, especially that third shutout against, like we talked about earlier, a really hot Larange team, regardless of the road trip.
100%.
That's a big performance, kind of a stamp performance, and that really sealed it. As soon as that happened, that was kind of it for the month. That was it.
But there was
several other guys.
There were several other guys we had talked about for goalie of the month. Dawson Smith, James Venn from the Melfort Mustangs, who had a great month as well.
Right there.
There was a bunch of great goaltending performances this month. So congratulations to Cam Herdlicka of the Estevan Bruins, SaskTel Goalie of the Month for November.
All right, we'll move on to defensemen. Good with that?
Sure.
Now, this is, again, we talked about this on Monday with the Players of the Week. It's newly sponsored. Super U, Defenseman of the Month. Now, this one, again, kind of came down to the last night because there was a few names involved in the discussions, and this guy put up, what was it, a 4-point night? 3-point night, 1 goal and 2 assists for Xander Stewart of the Nipawin Hawks. Jeremy, what do you got to say about Xander this month?
Well, this season he's been great.
Absolutely.
He's tied for, I think, 3rd in the SJHL now in points with 21
for defensemen.
Yep. Sorry, yep.
That's okay.
Just had to add that. Yeah,
and he's 3rd on his team as well.
Yeah, 3rd on his team. I mean, you're talking about a guy who plays in every situation for the Nipawin Hawks. Probably plays, mid 20 minutes a night, 25, 27 minutes a night easily. And like you touched on, he's been a power play quarterback for them. He plays a penalty kill. He's been outstanding for them this season. And, for the 19-year-old he racked up, he had 3 goals and 6 assists in 8 games this season, or in this month. Yeah. But he had a goal and 2 assists last night in a big 5-3 win. And I think for not just Xander, but this entire Nipawin Hawks team, they're just going to get better as the year goes on because they are a young team. You're a young team with a young coaching staff. You're going to get better as the season goes on. And you're seeing that from players like, Xander Stewart, for example. he's just a prime example of it. But again, because of the different schedules and everything like that, I think this month was a little tricky when it comes to defenseman of the month.
It changed a few things.
It did. There was definitely a few players that we definitely discussed, but I think Xander Stewart, at the end of the day, I think that was easily, for me at least, the right choice for the Super U defenseman of the month.
And, really interesting little fact, 3 goals, 6 assists. You mentioned it. His first 3 goals of the year.
Yes.
He's got a ton of assists. He's putting up a ton of assists out there.
He had the reverse of the Cy Young early on in the season.
Right.
He had about, what it was like 0 goals and
I think
like 12 assists.
Yeah, 12 or 13 or something like that. And he has 12 power play assists out there. He's the quarterback on that power play, and he's been a big part. 6'3", 200 pounds. Like, how can you go wrong? There's a lot of positives to that kid's game. So shout out to Xander, and he had a great month. Yeah. You ready to move along to the rookie?
One more point to add for Xander. I mentioned he's tied for 3rd in SJHL defenseman scoring. He's only 1 point behind 1st.
There you go.
There's a couple of players that are like that. Top 5 is very tight when it comes to SJHL defenseman scoring.
There you go.
And I mean, with the way the Nipawin Hawks put up goals, I wouldn't be surprised if he's near the top at the end of the season.
Might catch fire now that he's put up some goals as well in the month of November. So that's exciting. He's right there. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm just looking at, like you mentioned, the defenseman scoring, and he is right there. Let's move on to the rookie of the month, brought to you by our friends at Direct West. And this one, we're going back south, down to the southeast. Logan Ziegler for the Estevan Bruins. Now, there was a bit of debate, but he was right there at the top, I think, for everyone involved in the voting on this month's rookie of the month.
I mean, he was above a point per game this month, in the month of November. In 9 games played, he had 4 goals and 6 assists. And I think the interesting thing is, we talk about the Estevan Bruins, how they, there's definitely Jason Tatarnic. You know what? He's making the moves to make his team better, and they continue to have new players coming in and whatnot, and there's another team they've definitely gotten better as the season's gone on. 100%. Like, I mean, they started off 1-6, and they've definitely turned it around. But
that big winning streak there in the middle.
Yeah, that big winning streak in the middle. But the acquisition of getting Logan Ziegler has paid dividends for them. He has been outstanding for them as a rookie. He's gotten opportunities to play in the top 6. He's getting power play time, and he's making it count. He has 6 goals and 16 assists this year, good for 22 points, and he's 1st in rookie scoring. He's quietly 1st in rookie scoring, I would say, because I think when it comes to rookies this year, I would say the likes of Riley Ash, Dylan Ruptash, Carson Cater. Those 3, for example, I think are probably the most talked about rookies.
Well, they've been winning the Rookie of the Week, and
correct. But I think Logan Ziegler is, he's quietly been the leading scorer among rookies this year, and I think he definitely deserves some recognition for being the Direct West Rookie of the Month, because he was outstanding in the month of November.
Yeah, and I think one of those things with a rookie specifically, I think you look for a guy who can give you a very strong effort every night, and I think Logan Ziegler's probably been that guy. If you would ask Jason Tatarnic, I'm sure he would tell you that. He 22 points in 29 games overall this season. Like you said, leading the league in that rookie scoring category. Maybe he doesn't have as many goals as Dylan Ruptash does.
Sure.
Maybe he doesn't have. Well, I guess he does have as many assists as Riley Ash does.
But I think
that's the thing, right?
I think a big reason why Ash and Ruptash get more recognition.
You could have a show together.
Yeah, just maybe they'll have a podcast together after their SJHL season.
The Buddy Cop show or something.
But what I was going to say is, I think maybe those two get a little bit more recognition because they are essentially the top scorers on their teams.
Definitely.
Right?
That has
Whereas, even though I will say Logan Ziegler is slowly climbing the ranks in the Estevan Bruins, I do believe he's 4th in scoring for them. But I think that's part of the reason why some people might talk a little bit more about Riley Ash. And that's why I also say he's quietly leading the league amongst rookies in points.
Yep.
And that's not a bad thing.
No.
That's not a bad thing at all. But anyways, it's good to finally recognize Logan Ziegler And he's definitely well deserving of Direct West Rookie of the Month.
Absolutely. He didn't win a Rookie of the Week, but that doesn't mean that he didn't have a bad month. And I think he was well deserving of the bigger picture of it all. And exactly. We talked about it. So there you go. As a little quick recap, MVP, SGEU MVP of the month, Jeremy Tremblay of the Flin Flon Bombers.
Great first name. Great first name.
Great first name.
We just got to establish that.
And you know what? He might as well win every month with that first name. You know what I mean? Sastel goalie of the month.
You said it, not me.
There's no Clarks in this league. We got to get on that. I'll talk to some
There are
GMs.
amongst the broadcasters.
That's true. That's true. Sastel goalie of the month. Estevan Bruins goaltender Cam Herdlick, a big month. Super U defenseman of the month, Xander Stewart from Nipawin. And of course, we just talked about him, the rookie of the month, Logan Ziegler from the Estevan Bruins, Direct West rookie of the month. There you go. Shall we move on to the big topic du jour?
Well, and
topic of the day.
Before we get to this next topic, I think the big thing we got to mention is there's going to be stuff that we're probably not going to talk about when it comes to the roster cut down day that'll come out after this podcast has been recorded. So before we I guess give the recap of what's happened so far, head to sjhl.ca for the latest when it comes to potential moves in the SJHL. Stay locked into the social media. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. That's where you'll find all the latest news when it comes to some of these moves, because the cut down deadline is 5 o'clock Saskatchewan time. We are recording Central time. I'm still trying to figure out the time zones myself, because I just moved from BC 4 months ago.
So the way I justify it in my head, Jeremy, is that half the year we're in Mountain Time, half the year we're in Central Time. I know that's not technically what I think people call it, but that's what I go with.
I genuinely, like, for example, when you set a time on like your laptop or device, there is a set Saskatchewan time. So that's why I always thought that Saskatchewan just had its own kind of
Saskatchewan.
So I just call it Saskatchewan time. Anyways. Anywho, 5 o'clock. We're recording this early mid afternoon, so there'll probably be some moves after we record this show. There will be, but yes, we kind of alluded to it. Today is the roster cut down deadline in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. It's not the trade deadline.
No,
it's not the trade deadline. It's the roster cut down deadline.
Do you want to explain that?
Teams have to.
I think there is some confusion around how that works. Do you know like the kind of the basics of how that works?
Yes. Well, essentially, prior to December 1st, you can carry a good amount of players.
Right.
You can have 5 or 6 healthy scratches and whatnot. Whereas now usually December 1st you have to cut down to 23.
Right. 23.
That's usually the number you have to kind of get down to, and then that's when you see a lot of movement. And that's why I always thought the SJHL was the CJHL, I should say, because this happens kind of anywhere. But it's interesting because it's almost like there is 2 trade deadlines.
Yeah, no way, yeah.
Because usually you see a lot of movement ahead of December 1st, and then once you get towards the actual trade deadline, which is January 10th, there's also lots of movement. So the last week there's been a decent amount of stuff, but we'll just go with the stuff that we know of from about 3 days ago.
Sure. November 28th.
November 28th and on. I guess I'll just read them off. Is that probably I'll just read them off, and we'll run through them.
Do you want me to read them and you can have a quick reaction to each one, maybe? Go with that, something like that? Or do you want to just go through them?
How about we react to the most recent ones? Because I think some that are... Yes. Yeah. There's one we definitely want to talk about for sure. I'll run through quickly the trade movement from November 28th to 29th. So on the 28th, which was Wednesday.
You know what? Nope, I have no idea
that's
anymore.
Not the date. It was Monday.
Monday.
28th was Monday.
Who knows?
I don't know. They all bleed together.
Yeah.
The Nipawin Hawks acquired Chase Visser from the Lloydminster Bobcats. You kind of mentioned that. The Estevan Bruins traded Logan Walker to the Dauphin Kings. And the Kindersley Clippers acquired Wyatt Cook from the Flin Flon Bombers for a PDF and a 4th round pick in 2023 SJHL draft. On the 29th, Flin Flon Bombers trade Lorenzo Bono and a PDF to the Kempville 73s.
Love the name.
For
73s.
Noah Leonard Huel.
Yes. Now, I don't know if...
I'm going to apologize in advance if I mispronounce anybody's names.
It's fair.
Because obviously we haven't seen some games with some of these players.
I'm under the understanding that Noah Leonard's brother, former Flin Flon Bomber. So
You
they're
are
keeping
correct.
it in the family.
They are keeping it.
There you
That's
go.
what they know the connection for
Yeah.
sure. So for yesterday, here are the transactions that
Buckle
we
up.
have on SJHL.ca. The Estevan Bruins trade Mac Taylor to the Renfrew Wolves. The Melfort Mustangs trade Brett Ward to the OCN Blizzard. The Weyburn Red Wings trade Mateo Speranza to the Notre Dame Hounds for the rights to Riley Niven. The Nipawin Hawks acquire Jovan Malay from the Dauphin Kings for a PDF. And the Notre Dame Hounds trade Matthew Fair to the Carleton Place Canadians for a PDF. But I think the big trade that I think that was definitely making the rounds on Twitter last night, and it is a big trade, 100%. This is a very substantial trade. The Larange Ice Wolves trade 20-year-old forward Riley Morgan to the Weyburn Red Wings for their 3rd and 4th round pick in the 2023 SJHL draft. Well, this isn't worded right properly on the SJHL website.
It's a complicated one.
It is a complicated one. We might have to pull it up on Twitter, to be
Yeah,
honest with you.
some of the graphics that the teams put up, I think, lay it out. I know Larange's was very good.
We're
if you
going to
want
pull
to look at
that
their
up because the
specifically.
way it's worded on, I think, I want to make sure we get this clear.
Yeah,
I want to make sure we get this.
it's a big one.
This is a big trade. Regardless, it was a shocking trade, a little bit of a shocking trade.
I definitely double took it. Like I saw it.
You did a double take.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I was doing a bit of I was working in a
Okay.
vent.
I've got it. I got
and,
it.
It just caught my eye.
Here is the proper trade. The Ice Wolves trade 20-year-old forward Riley Morgan and a 6th round pick in 2024
Yes.
to the Weyburn Red Wings for a PDF, a 3rd and 4th round pick in the 2023 SJHL draft, and the SJHL rights to Carter Briltz and Luke Bateman.
Yes.
So a very big trade. Lots of moving parts in that deal.
Tons.
What was your initial reaction to that trade?
Again, like I said, I did a double take. I checked back because I know how big Riley Morgan has been for Larange throughout the season. I mean, over a point per game. Right? Am I correct in that? 24 points, I think, in 22 games, if I'm not mistaken. And 20-year-old forward Weyburn, where they are in the standings, that's a big addition for them. He's a speedy forward, adds a lot of dynamic offense to that team in Weyburn that could use it, and he's going to be a big part of their team. Not that Weyburn was not a speedy team. I'm just saying that any team could use speed, and Riley Morgan's got it. And I think there's some other names in that as well, in that trade as well. Carter Briltz, 18-year-old forward in the dub, and Luke Bateman, 20-year-old defenseman.
Right.
So there's that as well for Larange. But really nice addition by Weyburn. And remember we talked about this last week, Jer, about those teams in the bottom 6. Who's going to go out and maybe think that they're that close that they get a 20-year-old forward, or they go out and get an impact player? And Riley Morgan is that guy.
Yeah, I mean, if you can acquire a player like Riley Morgan at a deadline or anything like that, that's a big addition.
Yeah.
That's a big addition, 100%. We've talked about that on SJHL Weekly, SJHL Insider. I know Rory McGorn said it. He wouldn't be surprised if one of those teams that's, in the bottom 6 of the standings went out and made a substantial trade to get better,
Right.
to climb up the standings. And I mean, in my opinion, that is a big pickup for the Weyburn Red Wings. And Riley Morgan's going to play in every situation for them. He's going to be a top 6 forward. He's going to get lots of power play time, probably play on the penalty kill. I really like it. I've been a big fan of his game this season, and how well he's played. And yeah, he's gonna. I just look at when you look at the Weyburn Red Wings and their stats so far this year. I mean, instantly, an addition like Riley Morgan, he becomes your leading scorer already.
Yeah,
Riley
exactly.
Morgan has more points than any member of the Weyburn Red Wings.
Yeah.
So that's a huge boost to your offense. And now it's kind of curious. Like, is there going to be any other moves then for for the Weyburn Red Wings. But that's it's an outstanding trade for Weyburn, and obviously Larange, you get a lot of assets coming back, and obviously Larange is in win now mode.
Yeah,
for sure. So like they might be using those assets for other moves.
They
Who knows?
could. And my brain also, as soon as I got over the fact that Weyburn added Riley Morgan, my brain went to, okay, what's Larange's angle on this? Because like you said, they are in win now mode. I don't think Coach Kaminsky is messing around. They have a bunch of 20-year-old spots open now. If I'm looking at it, they only have, I think, 4 on their roster right now. So not that they have to use or fill up those spots today, because like you said, this isn't the trade deadline.
Correct.
But maybe they're positioning themselves for some stuff either later this month or into January. So that's kind of where my brain went, and that just opened up a whole new world of curiosity for me. Really interesting.
And more,
really interesting.
I'll say this, more transactions and more information is going to come out, I think, on past trades.
Sure.
And on trades that have happened and trades that are going to happen. I know having a conversation with Commissioner Kyle McIntyre this morning. Shout out to Commissioner Kyle.
Hey, Kyle.
Hope you feel better. There's going to be a lot of movement. There already has been some trades that just haven't been announced just yet. That'll be up on the SJHL website. So, this is a very fluid situation, obviously, with the December 1st cut down deadline. So the biggest thing I can recommend when it comes to trades and everything like that is follow the league social. Make sure you're following all the team socials and everything like that, because the teams are going to be putting out these trades and everything, because the cut down deadline is 5:00.
Yep.
So I guess my question to you, when it comes to looking at the cut down deadline and everything, and not knowing obviously, what's going to transpire when it comes to moves or anything like that, who's a team that intrigues you when it comes to, I guess you kind of already alluded to Larange a little bit there, but
no, but I'm glad you asked.
Who you got your eyes on, I guess, for the next couple of hours and the rest of this day?
Outside of Larange, Kindersley. Now, we didn't talk about it, but they did make another addition a few days earlier in Danton Cox getting added to their team. And over the season, Ken Plaquin's kind of been like adding here, adding there, adding here, adding there, adding pieces from other teams. They get, like I said earlier, Danton Cox, they got Wyatt Cook from Flin Flon. We talked about that one as well a little bit. And just the way that he's been tinkering slowly but consistently, I'm really curious what he's got up his sleeve, because I don't think that he's sitting around. I think he's getting his ducks in a row,
right?
And I think he's adding a piece here, filling out spots that are players that he thinks will make an impact. And I just really like kind of how he's been tinkering a little bit with his team throughout the year and not sitting around and waiting. So that's a team that I'm keeping an eye on. Another one made a couple of little moves. Notre Dame. I'm curious what they're interested in doing, because they are in that playoff spot. I think, like you mentioned earlier, in that last one. In the 8th spot, 3 points up on Yorkton right now, and they made a couple of little tinkers today, or yesterday, I should say, adding Mateo Speranza from Weyburn, so that I'm pretty sure that was a corresponding move with the Riley Morgan deal. So 18-year-old player there, but also they moved out a guy to make it all work. So what's Notre Dame got up their sleeves as well? I'm curious. Those two teams, to me, not that they're like splashy, but I'm just really keeping my eye on those two to see what they have cooking.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Notre Dame currently sitting in the final playoff spot right now in the SJHL with a 10-11 2-1 record, good for 23 points. And yeah, you mentioned with Kindersley, obviously they're coming off that week where they played 5 games in 6 days and they only got 2 points, and as a result, now they don't have any. We were talking about how many games in hand Kindersley had for the longest time, and now they don't.
Yeah,
now they don't, and they only got 2 out of a possible 10 points during that stretch, and as a result, they're kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit now as we hit kind of the halfway point of the season. They're 5-13, 2-4. They've lost so many 1-goal games and games that they've led, and they only have 16 points to show for it, and then now they're 7 points back of a playoff spot. With that being said, they can turn it around because they got a big game on Saturday at home against the Notre Dame Hounds, so they could get 2 points back
Yeah.
if they can win that in regulation. But yeah, those are two interesting teams to keep an eye out for. I think.
And I guess not a trade too, but they did add Logan Linklater. I will say that. Just
That's not
a trade,
no,
but
that's a huge addition. Though.
that's a big addition for them. So that's again makes me think like, what are they going to do here?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting for sure. I think because we've talked about the parity in the SJHL this year, you're seeing. I mean, those lists of trades that I read off, you're seeing a lot of trades, obviously out of province, involving other teams, because I think many teams in the SJHL this year think they can definitely win.
Mm-hmm.
And
reason.
obviously the standings show that. I mean, there's no reason why a team, fight at the bottom of the standings fighting for one of the playoff spots can't, do some damage potentially in the playoffs. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we're only at the halfway point of the season, right?
Definitely.
We still got December, January, February, and half of March.
Yeah.
But obviously, what teams do today and what teams do ahead of January 10th is going to make a difference. I mean, you mentioned two teams that are kind of fighting for a playoff spot. I'll go the opposite
Yeah, I was
end.
gonna say who's on your radar?
I'll go the opposite end of it, and just when you look at those top teams, top six,
Yeah.
I'm curious what those teams will do. I mean, the big thing for me when you look at the best team in the SJHL and the best team in the country, according to the top 20 CJHL rankings, the Battleford North Stars. Well, I think what's been so impressive about them, especially this year, is they've had this remarkable run to start the season, and really no moves.
Yeah.
No moves. It's been the same team, and
think it
and
was-
it begs the
Sorry, you go
question: do you keep the ball rolling?
Yeah.
I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix.
Yeah, they did make the one. No, never mind. Never mind. But yeah, you're right. Like, I think it was, you guys talked about it, I think, on SJHL Weekly, if I'm not mistaken. They haven't needed to. They've been so consistent and so strong throughout their lineup. So yeah, very, very interesting little narrative there. Where you're going
But then
with
you
that.
have 4 teams from 2 to 5 who are separated by 3 points. And we talk about how important it's going to be for those teams, and including Melfort too. Melfort's just 3 points, only 3 points back of Estevan, but from 2 to 6, those 5 teams fighting for home ice advantage. So I'm curious what those 5 teams will do. But again, if you want to stay up to date when it comes to all the transactions and everything that's going to happen with December 1st and the roster cut down deadline, be sure to stay tuned to sjhl.ca for all the latest on the news. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. That's where you're going to find the latest and greatest in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. We said we were going to spend a lot of time on that topic. We definitely did. So before we wrap up for today, we got to look at the weekend.
So let's look at Friday. We'll start with Friday. How about that? There are 4 games on Friday. Busy night. I guess we can go through them all here. Flin Flon is in Melville playing the Millionaires. LaRange is in Weyburn. Notre Dame is going to be heading up to Battlefords, and Yorkton taking on the Mustangs. Jeremy, what stands out for Friday night?
Well, let's just get through all the. I think
You want to go through all the games?
Yeah, I think let's just get through all the games.
All right. Saturday, big day on Saturday. LaRange is visiting Estevan for that rematch, as we talked about earlier. Humboldt's in Weyburn, taking on the Red Wings. The Flin Flon Bombers are taking on the Yorkton Terriers in Yorkton. Notre Dame's in Kindersley, and Battleford's takes on Melfort. There's a big one there. And then Sunday, we got what? We got the one on Sunday. So Melville versus Nipawin in the cage. So, Jeremy, these next few days coming up here, 10 games.
10
over a
games.
stretch of 3 days.
Yeah, much busier than last weekend.
Yeah, and hopefully they're all played. Let's just say that as well. Knock on wood.
I knocked on the table. Hopefully that didn't cause anything for me.
No, we should be okay, I think. So, yeah, give me your synopsis.
The Weyburn Red Wings are playing Tuesday's game against Yorkton kicked off a six game homestand, I think, for the Weyburn Red Wings. It was supposed to be 7, but then the postponement against the Estevan Bruins from the previous week. Big weekend at home. You got a game against Larange. You got a game against Humboldt. I'm going to guess. This is just a guess. I don't know anything. I literally don't. You would think Riley Morgan makes his Weyburn Red Wings debut against his former team on Friday.
You would think.
You would think.
You remember, Larange is here.
I know.
They're in this part of the province, so it wouldn't be that far for him to go. So
exactly.
You would hope,
anyways,
gets a practice under him and gets in the lineup.
So, but I think it's a big weekend for them. That trying to get back into get a little closer to a potentially playoff spot, and if you can get points against two of the top teams in the league, that's going to be extremely valuable for them. Battleford plays their first game Friday night in 13 days.
Good to see you, Battlefords. Welcome back.
Well, the postponement last week didn't help.
No.
Because they were supposed to be at home to Larange for 2 games.
Yeah.
But, that's always an interesting discussion about rest versus rust.
Oh, yeah. Every
13 days is a long time.
Mm-hmm. Especially when you were gearing up for something and it didn't happen. That too, right?
100%. So I'll be curious. Those are the 2 things I'm kind of watching for on Friday. I think Saturday though, the big game that I'm watching is Battleford and Melfort.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was looking.
Melfort is playing very well right now. Obviously, Battleford's been off to a great start this year. Melfort is one of the few teams to hand Battleford somewhat of a loss. Mm-hmm. Melfort beat the Stars in a shootout at the Access Communications Center in Battleford. So that's going to be a very good game. Mm-hmm. That for me, that's my game of the weekend.
Yeah,
for sure. But you look at, I think again, we've said this numerous times, but I think any games involving those bottom 6 teams, I'm intrigued for, just because you're starting to see just a little bit of separation. Nipawin and Notre Dame are playing some good hockey as of late. They're starting to earn some points, and those teams before it was separated by like 1 point, and now it's like 3 or 4. So can those teams that are currently out of a playoff spot keep pace and try to catch up?
Right.
And those points are going to be valuable.
Yeah.
Like Kindersley against Notre Dame on Saturday is massive for the Kindersley Clippers.
Is
huge for the Clippers.
Yeah.
I look at, Yorkton's got a tough weekend. Yorkton's got a very tough weekend. They're playing Melfort in Melfort and then Flin Flon at home. Melville, you're playing Flin Flon at home Friday, but then you're back at the Cage.
Mm-hmm. And that's a huge one too.
Big matchup between those 2 teams again.
Yeah.
A lot of intrigue this weekend, I think.
Yeah.
I think a lot of intrigue this weekend. What about you?
I think the only other one, well, not the only other one, but the one that I think makes a really strong push for that, game of the weekend marquee that we always talk about, Larange, the rematch in Estevan on Saturday night. Again, they're going to be on their 4th game in those 5 days after coming off of their game against Weyburn the night before. So which Larange team are we going to see? And I guess, in that ilk, they've made some moves here. We don't know what's going to happen the rest of today. That'll all come out. Again, make sure to keep your eye locked on Twitter and on SJHL.ca. So there might be some new faces in that lineup as well by Saturday. Who knows? But we'll see. I think that's a really interesting matchup again. I think, does Estevan, they play on? Mm-mm. No, that's their lone game of the weekend too. So it's a big one for them because, they only have one chance to get 2 points this weekend, and that's a big one for them. You're probably going to see Cam Herdlicka back in net. Who knows who's going to see the ice for the Ice Wolves in terms of their netminders, because they've been rotating really well, and that's one strength of theirs is that they are able to rotate really well with those goalies. So I know Chirico got the last game against Estevan, so maybe I don't know if they're going to switch that up, but we'll see. Really big game though for to end a road trip for Larange, or at least the week for Larange, and to have that one big game in front of their home fans for Estevan. So I like that match.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, which is interesting for Estevan too, is obviously you mentioned they played the most games.
Yep.
They played the most games, and it's not close.
Yeah.
They played 29. The next closest is actually Larange and Melville with 26. Mm-hmm. So their schedule is going to it's not going to be as busy as some of these other teams. So making sure to take advantage when you get games and taking advantage of getting your points.
Cam Herdlicka has played as many games as Larange.
There you go. Cam Herdlicka has played as many games as the Larange Ice Wolves.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is SFN's quietly won 3 in a row. They're 7-3 in their last 10, but just making sure for them taking advantage of all their games because you have Melfort right on your heels. Only 3 points back of the Estevan Bruins, but they got 4 games in hand.
Mm-hmm.
They got 4 games in hand. They'll make up one of those games in hand this weekend, but they'll still have a couple of games in hand. So you have to just keep taking advantage of the opportunities that you have because you have played the most games so far this year.
And maybe one other little thing to keep your eye on as well. I'm just looking at as we look at the standings, we talk about Larange and Estevan and Melfort. Humboldt 4-5-1 in their last 10 games. They did win their last game, of course, as it shows on the standings here. But are we going to start to see that Humboldt team from the beginning of the season come back and maybe start putting together some really solid stretches as well? Because they did. They were top 3 in the country there at the beginning of the season for good reason. So I know they had that kind of illness thing that they had to deal with there for a stretch and whatever else they were dealing with there for a stretch. And it hasn't been. I don't think that head coach Scott Barney is probably overly pleased with the last 10 games, and I don't think anybody would be. But they've got a couple games this weekend. So what are we going to see from Humboldt?
Well, Rory said it on SJHL Weekly.
Yeah.
And I think it obviously he's going to hit the nail on the head with it because that's his team.
He knows, yeah.
He works for them.
Mm-hmm. I guess they only have the one game. Sorry,
they're looking to establish consistency. I think that's the big thing. They're looking to establish consistency. They had 2 wins against Notre Dame, but then they lost to Melfort and Flin Flon, and then a win against Yorkton last week at home. They're looking to establish consistency, and that's the tricky thing too. As you just mentioned, they only got the one game this week.
Just the one game, yeah.
They only got the one game this week too, so another essentially week without and then playing a game, but it'll start to get a little bit busier for them, and I think it's an important stretch. I think for them before Christmas. Rory mentioned it on Monday, but the fact that they have 6 games remaining before Christmas, and you have Weyburn, Notre Dame, Melville, Larange, Kindersley, and Weyburn. So a team that you're fighting for in the standings in Larange, but then the other teams are well below you.
Right.
So you got again, it's taking advantage of the games that you have.
Yeah.
For them. So that'll be, and of course, you know what? The other thing too is, what I'll be intrigued with that Weyburn Humboldt matchup too, because last time Humboldt was down there in Weyburn, of course, they were fighting that illness, and they ended up losing to the Weyburn Red Wings 5-4. So I'm sure they'll want a little bit of revenge on the Weyburn Red Wings. But be sure to stay up to date with everything in the SJHL this week and for the rest of the season by, of course, liking us on Facebook, following us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube page. That is where you are going to find all the episodes of SJHL Insider and SJHL Weekly, just not this week because we don't have a studio. And we are recording this in a very small office. But be sure to subscribe wherever you'll find your podcast, whether that be Apple or Spotify. Of course, our audio podcast sponsor is SGI. Thank you so much, SGI, for your support when it comes to sponsoring our audio podcast this year. But we have so many great sponsors as well. Chevrolet, Capital Auto Mall, Cantera Seeds, RBC, SaskTel, SGU, Direct West, Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association, Tourism Saskatchewan, and Young's Equipment. Thank you so much for your support, because these shows would not be possible without your great support. And before we go, Clark.
Ooh. Before we go.
Before we go.
Okay.
Usually the sponsors are the last thing I say before we go.
But this
is what we call in the business a tease.
Oh.
We'll have a special announcement on Monday.
Oh boy.
On SJHL Weekly with myself.
Are people going to want to tune in?
Jamie Neugebauer, Rory McGoran.
Yeah.
Special announcement. Pretty big one.
Are people going to want to tune in for this?
People should probably tune in for this. Show's going to be at 1:30 on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube on Monday. Big announcement. It's pretty cool.
Is it for any particular fan base, or is it kind of league wide?
No,
I think everybody's going to show interest.
Everyone's going to love it.
Ooh.
Everyone's going to love it.
Wow.
From the tippity top to Saskatchewan to the bottom.
I thought you were going to come up with some sort of like little word play
I
for
was
the
trying
bottom
to.
there. Yeah.
I was trying to,
Bippity
but
bottom or something.
I
don't like it.
I didn't
Terrible.
like that either.
3 out of 10.
Everyone's gonna like this.
Great.
I can pretty much guarantee it. So be sure to tune in for that.
Consider myself teased, Jer.
Well, that's good.
I'm teased.
He's teased, but you know exactly what it is.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I'm trying to play it off.
I know. You're trying to sell it. I like it.
It is good. Though.
But yes, be sure to tune in to SJHL Weekly on Monday, 1:30, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. It's an exciting announcement. And of course, we'll also recap the whole weekend or the weekend in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. But thank you so much for joining us today on SJHL Insider. We hope to have our studio back next week for the show so you can see our lovely faces.
Pearly whites.
If not, we will be in this small office once again recording. But as the kids say, Clark, TBD. TBD.
Hashtag stay tuned.
Hashtag stayed tuned. But 10 games tonight in the or not tonight.
Oh, that'd be a big night.
It would be a big night.
Double headers.
10 games this weekend in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. Going to be a great weekend of hockey for Clark Monroe. My name's Jeremy Corrigan, and this has been another episode of SJHL Insider, and enjoy the games this weekend, everyone.